Jeremy Corbyn, he's under huge pressure on a whole number of fronts, one of which, of course, is what is the Labour Party policy on Brexit. Now, today he's been in Dublin, he's been with the Irish Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, and, of course, he's been asked once again by the press, what does he want to see? How is the Brexit deadlock going to be broken? And this was what Jeremy Corbyn had to say about a general election.
Our first priority would be actually a general election. Look, it's 2 years since the last general election. This government has no legislative programme worthy of the name. It has been incompetent, to say negligent, in its negotiations with the EU, changing its stance many times, almost as often as it's changed its Brexit secretaries. And now we have a Tory party leadership contest which appears to be between no deal, and no deal. Well, this is not acceptable. I think the public deserve the right to elect a new parliament and elect a new government that can go on from there.
So, of course, that's the line he's been trotting out all the way through this, not really saying quite where Labour stands on Brexit, but consistently saying there should be a general election, but setting himself very clearly against what he calls a no deal, what I'd call a WTO Brexit or a clean break Brexit. But then he was asked again, specifically about his views on a second referendum.
We don't back a rerun of 2016. That happened, that's gone.
Right.
What I do say is that if Parliament comes to an agreement, then it's reasonable that if Parliament wishes it, there should be a public vote on it.
Well, I don't know whether you're any the wiser. I'm not. I mean, it's couched in language that really is very difficult to understand. You know, he's got his deputy Tom Watson screaming at him, much of his parliamentary party screaming at him. So, you know, they want him to come out fully in favour of a second referendum, and because he won't, they did lose votes last Thursday to the Liberal Democrats. But because he won't actually say that he really wants Brexit to happen, they're also losing votes, of course, to the Brexit Party and others. So they're in a hell of a mess. But what he is saying, and I think this is relevant, he's saying either there's got to be a general election or a second referendum. And I have to say, I think that generally is the conversation. It's difficult to see how our Parliament can go on in crisis as it is. So I'm going to ask you today, which would you prefer? Would you prefer, sometime this year, a general election or a second referendum? And if you think a general election is the way to sort this out, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think a second referendum is fair and justified because we didn't really know what we were voting on last time. Text to 84850. Or are you completely and utterly fed up with being asked to vote again and again and again and would rather neither happen, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, the growing number of you watching us live on Facebook will no doubt have your two penneth as well. I have to say I am opposed to a second referendum being fought. It seems to me that you can't hold a second referendum until you've first implemented the original one. It's very anti-democratic and wrong, I think, to force it again. But I'm going to say this, I haven't said it before. If we have not left on the 31st of October, which is the new date that we're supposed to leave the European Union, if we are failed once again by government and parliament, then I think there should be a general election later on this year. I just think we've had enough of repeatedly being made promises that get broken. So that is very much my view. Let's go to Steve, who's a new caller in Beckenham. Good evening, Steve, and welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. So which would you prefer, Steve?
Well, I don't think a general election can really solve anything at the moment, because I don't really think that we have a really good sense of the will of the people. I heard you and plenty of other people say 17-odd million people voted to leave. I mean, almost as many people voted to stay, and just as many people didn't vote at all. The figures that you're trying out there really are only a third of the population, really, of this voting population who decided they want to leave, and that's not really enough. I think if you're going to focus on anything at all, it shouldn't be on trying to convince leavers to stay or stayers to leave, but to find out what the rest of the people that didn't vote at all want.
How on earth, Steve, can you do that? And by the way, bear in mind...
I'll tell you how you do it.
One second. Bear in mind that when Tony Blair won the general election in 2005, he only got 35% of the vote.
Yeah, no,
and of the population, between 20 and 25%. So election... No, Steve, my point is this. Elections are decided surely by those that choose to vote.
Well, yes, but it doesn't have to be that way, does it? Because in actual fact, if you feel that change is something that you want, you would get off and vote about it. What you have is people that bothered enough to get off their backsides and say, yes, I'd like things exactly the way they are. But I would consider that every one of those people that didn't vote also feel that way. Why would you bother getting up and voting to remain the same? I think you can count all of those people as stay voters. Now, you're not going to like the sound of that.
Steve, that's nonsense, isn't it? That's nonsense.
It's not nonsense at all, is it? Because if you cared enough for change, you'd get off and do something about it.
No, because Steve, even in the heyday,
let me finish my point.
even in the heyday, Steve, even in the heyday, when turnouts were high in this country, general election turnouts, I think the all-time record since the war was 82%.
This isn't the general election. This is a different thing. This is a binary decision. What you couldn't do is that with a choice of three parties, you can't make those kind of assumptions. But with a binary choice, like yes or no, in or out, what you can do quite safely is say, we're going to assume that everybody is in unless you tell us you want to be out. It's just like saying about being an organ donor or something like that. We make a basic assumption about your standpoint. If you don't like that basic assumption, please feel free to come and tell us what you would prefer.
Steve,
that is the choice that should have been put forward.
Steve, if you assumed,
that is the choice that should have been put forward.
If you assumed that the non-voting majority supported the status quo, there'd be almost no point ever holding any referendum, would there?
Well, of course there would, because if you cared enough to make it to tell people. To tell people that you wanted change, you would say something about it. Now, you're saying that from the point of view of somebody that wants us to leave. So what you have
No, Steve. No, Steve.
I'm a certain way as a win, Nigel, and I don't really think that's the case.
Steve. I'm saying that elections are decided by those who choose to go and vote. We could, of course, move to a system of compulsory voting. Would you prefer to see that?
Well, I don't think we need to fine people for not voting, but I think you can make a basic assumption about how they feel. You don't have to fine people that don't vote. What you can say is, we think you're staying unless you tell us you want to leave. I think that's a perfectly reasonable standpoint. And it includes everybody in it.
So you don't want...
doesn't feel like they want that assumption being made. It's perfectly free to go and vote and tell us that they think differently. But then you're including everybody in that vote.
So would you choose a general election or a referendum?
Well, I would choose personally a referendum, because I don't think a general election can make any difference. There's no clear policy in any... I wouldn't vote for the Brexit Party. I wouldn't support the Brexit Party unless I knew that a clear majority in the country, not just the people that bother to vote, but the people that, all of the population, in all of its colours and majesty, actually chooses to vote for that. Then how can you do anything other than support a Brexit Party? But at the moment, you've got a third of the population that didn't give you an opinion at all. How can you... I mean, you wouldn't change the fortunes of any organisation with that little support. You have a third of the support of the country. It's not enough, Nigel.
Well, Steve, I have to say, I've heard a lot of political arguments over the years. That one's very new on me, and I thank you for it. OK, Nigel, bring on an election, says Patricia in Whitstable. She's up for a general election. Corbyn's strategy is...